Hello, welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. On the club today, the influencers are coming, how social media stars have overtaken traditional media in ad revenue. Michael Savage, media editor at The Guardian, shepherds us into this new era. Also on the show, as The Standard announces a new partnership with Message Heard, we chat to the podcast outfit's Jake Warren about the magic ingredients that turn print into podcasts. All that plus Warner Brothers Discovery give more details about their split. Plus, in the Audio Network quiz, I become Professor Brian Cox. That's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. Gents, welcome to the club. Nice to see you here. Michael, first time, recently installed as The Guardian's media editor. Membership, obviously, of the Media Club is your sort of final rite of passage. But who would you like as your plus one?
I think I'd like to bring in someone I've heard a bit about already in the short time I've done this job, which is Ollie Madden, who's heading from Film 4 to go do Netflix. I was told, as I say, I haven't been doing this job long, but I'd already been told that he was sort of rated as a commissioner and very plugged into the UK production scene, so that's interesting. It's also another person leaving Channel 4, of course, after their chief executive is gone, looking for a new chairman, so it's all changed there, so it's interesting times at Channel 4.
It is, and he was going to be sort of their great white hope for drama, and I remember sitting down with some of the Channel 4 team, and they're very excited about what he had planned. And I guess it's hard to turn down a big shiny Netflix job.
Yeah, well, this is the world we're in now, isn't it? And I suppose a big question for the UK, given the difficulties the UK production scene has had at times, will this be a good thing for them or not really? Will his appointment at Netflix help Netflix lean into the UK scene, make more sort of UK focused things? So we'll have to see.
And Jake, welcome back to the club. Who can we give an award to for their valiant work this week by getting a club membership?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate, I want to keep it in my lane of podcasting. I'm going to nominate Davey Gardner, who is, I believe his title might be the head of podcast or head of audio at the Tribeca Film Festival. And I believe they are the first sort of, premier, really credible film festival to actually have dedicated podcasting selections now. I think there's 16, and 2 of them have already going through that IP adaptation phase. And I think with, as we know, podcasting more and more becoming that A/B development testing ground for the streamers, the Netflixes of this world, for someone like Tribeca to go, actually, it deserves its own space is great. I mean, you probably would have experienced the same as me as like the Arias in 2021 when I think they had their first, best podcast category, which we were nominated for a show about, someone that used to be in Al Qaeda. And I noticed that we were up against, My Dad Wrote a Porno and, someone else that was just completely different genre format. I thought, they've clearly done that holding their nose, and for Tribeca to be making that front and centre, I think is great for our industry. Because
they've had a couple of years now, but it's really starting to become a big part of that festival.
Yeah.
And it shows me that it's an art form as well.
And to be fair, I don't know Davey well. I think I've spoken to him once or twice. If he is an avid watcher and listener of the show, I will take any and all favoritism. But I know he's made a big part of it in the few years he's been there to say actually audio is, it's a craft in its own right. It deserves to have the same space, attention and limelight and the way that films do. And I think that's fantastic to have the credibility of Tribeca propping up our industry.
Should we get the BFI to jump into UK podcast?
America sneezes, we catch a cold. They'll be next. Just give them 24 months.
It does feel like the media world's changing so fast. We're sort of catching up, aren't we? Chasing our tails slightly. And some of these, we're going to realise how important some of these forms are if we haven't already. Yeah,
and it's important to not always just think about the money. I think a lot of traditional awards about audience and scale and kind of cash that follows it. It's important to look at.
And it's recognition for those audiences which are hard earned.
Okay, another major milestone has been achieved in social media this year. More ad revenue will be generated by influencers than traditional media companies. Now, Michael, you've been writing about this, and I've sort of stretched what kind of the meaning of the word influencer. Tell us more about what you've uncovered.
Yeah, so as I say, I started covering the media in just at the start of March, and since then I spent most of my time just thinking about the massive change that's going on, the fragmentation of audiences that we all know about, the repercussions of that. And then along comes one sort of nugget in a report that tells the whole story, really. And it really jumped out at me. It's from a WPP Media report on the ad industry. And what it said was user-generated content platforms, well, they're going to attract more content-driven ad revenue, then it called it professionally produced material. Obviously, that is quite a grey area, as it
it's not quite binary, is it?
Exactly, and of course, if you're Mr. Beast, you're hard pushed to say it's not professionally produced. A lot of money goes into it, but you can see the point it's making and the sort of tipping point that's coming. Really, that shouldn't surprise anyone. That places like YouTube, TikTok, this is where a lot of content is being generated. And when you follow the money, people are seeing that. And that's why we're seeing this. I think it really tells the story of the modern media at the moment.
And also, I guess it's sort of following attention. Where is consumers' attention? Is it on not just the small screens? YouTube does well on big screens too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this problematic for the old media or for traditional media?
I think it's just the story of this time, which is adaptation, trying different things, experimenting and changing. And you can just see it. Everyone's trying different things. And I think there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of branching out into different areas. Suddenly written form is doing visuals doing audio. And, there's a lot of competition, but you can see people adapting all over the place. Some of it will work, some of it won't. We
see sort of your Channel 4 and Channel 4.0, they've got a sort of YouTube channel for that. They're putting a lot of that content also now into Spotify. For Spotify's video push, you've got ITV are putting a lot of full shows on YouTube as well. Do you think some of those big broadcasters are just jumping to it when suddenly the money's there, or have they missed the boat a bit? Have they let Mr. Beast and his ilk grab all the attention and ad dollars?
I think it would be defeatist to sort of give up on it, but I think if you look at Channel 4, they're a good example, aren't they? Because they've really run at it, a lot of their content on YouTube and things like that. Clearly they skew younger as an audience, so it's important that they've got to be in these places. The question in my mind is, do you cannibalise your audience? In other words, obviously YouTube, this huge platform that squats right across media, and they take a chunk, right? So this is not just free for Channel 4, it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
What they say when I've asked them about it is, actually, this is a new audience. They aren't people who would have been watching on Channel 4 otherwise.
You're not replacing a linear
They're saying this is
consumer.
People.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a challenge there for something like the BBC. Senior people there have talked about doing more on YouTube, and it's about what you do, how much you do, how you get people back to the original broadcaster, and that's the challenge there, I think.
Jake, I was at a conference. The ITV were there, and there was sort of whoever like the super YouTube channel manager person was, who was very happy to welcome ITV onto their platform, and whatever they want to do, hey, we're all for it. I mean, in some ways, YouTube are the big winners in this battle for content providers, aren't they?
Absolutely. I think the world has moved from commissioning to acquisition. And so if you can prove that you've got that audience on YouTube, actually, guess what? The networks need you a lot more now than you needed them in order to sort of gain and accrete an audience. And, one very, very silly small example that I think was really interesting. And again, this is kind of stretching the barrier, the boundaries of maybe what you would call sort of influencers. But in rugby, the Pro D2 rights of the second division, which is, no caps, you've got all this sort of, people being paid squillions and squillions to go and play there, superstars. The rights were bought by a YouTuber. I think they call themselves, the Egg Chasing Show or something like that.
This Egg Chasers podcast.
Egg Chasers podcast, exactly. And I thought that is brilliant because you've got there influencers who, the content they're not creating is their own. They're licensing and then creating content, that's ancillary and around that. And I imagine the advertising's not huge for that, but you are taking a hyper-focused, dedicated audience that you imagine if you're smart enough, you should be able to find those brands and sponsors and advertising money that wants to reach that dedicated audience. And I just thought, that could be the future. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this, Michael. So this is the Tim Cocker Egg Chaser podcast. Has a radio background actually, and has done some commentary in the past for BT Sport. Has built a YouTube channel around rugby and acquired the rights. I imagine for not much money because no one else seemingly was after it, and they've sort of built shows off the back of it. I'm rugby. I'm not a huge rugby fan, but I had a look at what the play counts were. Not bad. It's not bad to start up a thing. And also we see this week that Gary Lineker's probably done a deal with DAZN for access to footage for the FIFA's Club Championship as well.
Yeah, no, I was going to mention that's another example, isn't it, where you've suddenly got a podcast company signing a deal with a broadcaster to clips and, is it a mini match of the day? I don't know. Let's see how it goes. But I have to say already I've become totally fascinated by YouTube and the size of it, because it's not just in this space or podcasting, it's right across the piece. You know, it takes a bit of everything. It's incredibly powerful. There's not really a competitor. It feels like it's got the world at its feet, really. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it evolves.
I think in podcasting, YouTube is sort of looms, and we've talked about it on the show quite a bit. Some shows are sort of YouTube native and they've kind of come from that direction. Others have sort of trying to back organize themselves into being video shows. But for creators, it's quite difficult. Like the old world of podcasting was pretty easy. Like you signed up with an Acast or a DAX or an Audio Boom, an ad network, and then never really had to worry about the money. But now you have to think about your YouTube money and your Spotify money and your RSS money to make it much more difficult for creators. Is it another barrier for new entrants into the podcast space?
Yeah, because it makes it more complex, because there's different rules of engagement with different platform, and also even just going down to, the format of how a show, it works on different platforms in different ways, right? There's different demographics in those different platforms, and even to, is it a video native show or is it an audio native show, right? I sort of remember in the first dalliances of people putting podcasts on YouTube, I think it was Sky Sports Cricket. They uploaded one. I don't know if you saw this quite a few years ago, and they literally just ripped the audio, and it opened with one of the presenters going, "Now, if you look at the screen," and it was an audio-only thing. And I was just thinking, okay, we've moved on a little bit since then. So yes, it's more complex, it's more complicated, but the truth is, it's worth it because those audiences don't cannibalize each other. You're fishing in different pools.
Well, speaking of the advertising and the ad revenues from the article, 5 companies account for 54% of all ad revenue. Can you remember all 5?
Let's see how we get on. Google, Meta, Amazon, Alibaba, and ByteDance.
Yeah, I mean, some of those are quite interesting. People obviously familiar with Google and Meta, TikTok as well. I mean, Amazon are a huge media company. It's not this isn't all Prime TV, is it? This is something else.
No, absolutely. Like on the site on Amazon, I mean, it's incredible the amount of advertising you get on these big outlet sites now. I think Walmart's the same. It's right up there, isn't it, in terms of ad revenue? So, it's
kind of sponsored listings when you search on Amazon.com.
It's a fascinating phenomenon, actually.
And I guess Alibaba being similar, but in other markets, doing the same trick.
Yeah, some of these Chinese companies are just absolutely colossal in a similar way to the ones we know, probably better the US companies that we know more here. But the same is true in China as well. They have these huge behemoth companies.
I'm looking forward to our version of the TikTok shop. I can just sell great media items whilst doing the show. Some more news from Warner Brothers Discovery have announced some details about the split. You might remember that they announced that they had kind of internally split the company in 2, one half sort of networks, the other half the sort of shiny new things like Max now, HBO Max again. I mean, Michael, this is 3 years after Warner Brothers Discovery sort of appeared and on the scene. Are they splitting sort of in the same way that they started, or have they got a different view on what they should be going into the future?
I mean, it does seem, and some of the noise from the company seems to have been that they are ending up pretty near to where they started. I think probably if you know the business very well, you could be critical about some of the decisions made there. I think if you're taking a step back, you could also say, well, look, we're in a hugely changing industry. People are trying different things and some things aren't going to work. And for whatever reason, they're trying to unroll this thing. What's interesting is they seem to be separating off the sort of, as you say, the flashy new stuff from the sort of legacy broadcast stuff. So that's an interesting phenomenon. And if you look at some of these companies on the sort of legacy side, if I use that word, CNN, for example, they're all looking for similar things, and that is sort of subscription models, making premium content that people want to buy. They see this, and it's not just them, as the way to make these things sustainable in the long term.
And we saw kind of Comcast do a similar job. It's sort of like the networks, things that you remember from the Sky EPG in one business, and then the IP stuff in the other, and often content in the other as well. People have sort of perhaps unkindly referred to the sort of original networks businesses as the shitcos. Do you think that's a lot of the cash still comes in to the shitcos, and this will probably be the bigger part of WBD's split. Are they shitcodes, or do they just need to be looked after in a different way?
I think some of them are still making a lot of money, actually. So I think it's a complete misnomer, really. And, it's just another way of saying we're in a period where consumption is changing very fast. If you look at something like CNN, there's a lot of brilliant work done and a lot of brilliant people would be willing to tune in and probably pay to tune in for. I'm not saying that is the model, but this is good content. They're producing good stuff, so there's got to be a future for stuff like that, I think.
I mean, Jake, if you're CNN and you're Mark Thompson, would you be a bit annoyed that you've sort of been shoved in with Discovery Channel and some old movie channels and some other bits and bobs?
Yeah, if it's all together in one big jumble, it diminishes some of the wins that you might be having individually for your patch. In the same way, it might also hide some of the stuff which is not doing so well. And if you kind of unravel it, as you said, a sort of reverse roll up, and sort of so actually everyone needs to stand on their own 2 feet, it also perhaps gives you a bit more clarity to go, well, this is what we need to shut down and this is what we need to focus in on. Because if it is all jumbled up together, it becomes, I suppose you become liable for all of the bad news, and some of the good news perhaps gets hidden. So yeah, I think it does make sense. I think if you were in a bit that was performing well, you'd probably welcome it.
Michael, I mean, one of the things that the WBD have done actually quite a good job in is cutting their debts. They sort of launched with like billions and billions of pounds of debt from AT&T. David Zaslav, the CEO, has done a pretty good job of reducing. The networks business is probably going to get the majority of that debt, and the shiny business will be allowed to go off in a slightly better financial situation. I was looking at it and I was thinking, does this mean that like the Discovery Channel end, because they're keeping Discovery Plus in the networks business, that it's all going to be split from Max, their big streaming service? And are we adding another streaming service potentially to the mix?
Oh my goodness, not another one. And if you're like me and you like cycling, you need Discovery. It's got all of it. So this is the problem. Yeah, another subscription. So apologies to my direct debit advisor at my bank, I'm afraid. Yeah,
it's probably going to be doubled up. Also, I think the networks business gets like a 20% share in the streaming business. So there's like a nice little bonus. And one of the questions, though, is whether this really is actually just being set up to be sold. All these networks, and Comcast have launched their own version of this with Versant. And the CFO of Warner Brothers Discovery, I think, is going to be the chief executive of the new channels business. I mean, if you put a money man in charge of it, will it live as its own thing just for a very short amount of time before they bundle it with something else?
Well, they do have like plans, don't they? Pretty clear plans. And you talked about Mark Thompson earlier. I mean, he is clearly a man with a plan to try and change things at CNN, make things more sustainable. And when you hear him talk, he thinks very big and differently and wants to try things. So, and I think that's the right approach, clearly, in this climate. But as I say, that the backbone of it is going to be high quality stuff, ultimately. And I do think on the other side of the business, they've got a lot of good IP, haven't they? I think they've got DC comics, things like this. And
new Harry Potter series, of course.
And they've tried a long time to pay down the debt. They've been concentrating on that. The share price hasn't really recovered in any way, although it has slightly after this environment. So I suspect it's all related to that.
If they are starting new streaming, you'd be happy if you're an illegal Fire Stick seller.
Yes,
there's some more
some more content to add on. The ultimate bundling, of course. Right, finally, just before the break, Netflix have announced an investment of $1 billion in Spanish language originals. Jake, this is it's different from a commitment to Mexican content they made 4 years ago that I'm sure you remember. But has Spanish content been overlooked by big media in an Anglo-centric world?
I think so. I mean, I did some Googling for this one because I wanted to actually at least have one fact for you, which was, and it shocked me actually, which was that Netflix, and I know that's just one of the big platforms, but 40% of people globally actually watch and consume all of their content with the subtitles on, which I think maybe that it perhaps skews generationally a bit of a younger thing. You hear a lot about people do want to consume it with subtitles, and that just naturally means it almost doesn't matter so much about the native language that you're listening if you're consuming it through the subtitles that you're reading. So I think it's a smart play, right? I mean, how many Spanish speakers are there in the world?
Loads. A few.
And also, if you look at the quality of the content which is coming out of the Spanish-speaking world, right? You think of the Money Heists of this world, Netflix, you've got The Platform, there's all of these great shows which I think the sort of sneering, we only make top tier stuff in the sort of English speaking world and everything else is sort of B tier and below. I think that misconception is changing, and so I think it's a smart play.
Yeah, also we obviously saw the success of Squid Game, obviously not in Spanish,
Yes.
but in Korean, which is obviously a super global hit for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Parasite. I mean, there's all of these. I think it's more of a equal opportunity world now, regardless of the language it's created in.
Yeah, and Michael, I mean, Netflix in particular has been pretty bullish about native content, really, in lots of markets, perhaps because of those global hits. Do you think that's a bit of an advantage for them over some of their streaming competitors?
I think so. And I think the other part of this is they're so sort of big now, Netflix, and powerful. That comes with sort of political questions as well. And, it's no coincidence, obviously, that this announcement came, arm in arm with the Spanish Prime Minister.
Yeah.
These companies now, Netflix in particular, where it makes production, where it produces the things it chooses to make. These are political questions now, almost as we've seen in this country, with complaints about its influence here. Should there be a levy on streamers? And so I think maybe there's one eye on that as well, producing stuff locally in different areas. It can't harm them in terms of the sort of political pressures they face.
Should we be legally mandated to watch Adolescence? Or whatever it was, it's no different.
Jake, do you think about languages for some of your shows and whether you'd like them to live in different versions?
Yes, we do, but it's difficult because you don't want to do it in a way of which it's just AI, right? Because it's the nuances. Well, we actually had this thing a couple of years ago. I had two examples that spring to mind. One, we did a sort of investigative show where we kind of smuggled microphones into prisons in Syria, and it was all about disappeared peoples. You lose a lot of the authenticity of listening to the actual person if you're just dubbing over their voice. Then you have to deal with, I suppose, the syntax and the way people speak. And then even with things like the Arabic world, you've got to deal with dialect as well. And so it becomes a really difficult thing to do. Similarly, we did a show, I remember we had Virat Kohli come on one of our shows, cricketing god. And it was the first ever time that he revealed that he'd been suffering with mental health. And so that went hugely viral. And we had that kind of moment where, like, my God, do we need to dub this into sort of, 19 different native Indian speaking languages? And actually, we kind of realized, no, you probably don't need to do that. That's a bit overkill. So I think
someone else will probably do it for you.
Yeah, they will do it for you. But it has to be done with intentionality so that it isn't AI slop. And I don't quite know what the answer to that is, other than, you do the classic thing where you hear the trail of someone speaking and then it's dubbed over. That to me is the best solution at the moment in order to protect the authenticity, not just the accuracy, because the accuracy is probably there now, but it is about that authenticity, I think.
Okay, when we return, a bit more on podcasts in the changing world, and also about whether a show can still be audio only. We'll see you in a sec.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been thinking about dog poo. Hear me out, we've specifically been thinking about our clients talking rubbish and their new petition to cut the greenwashing from so-called compostable dog poo bags. It's not social strategy or new artwork, though we have been on that too, but it's an innovative way to get new eyes on a show. To find out about what we can do for you or for anything else to do with podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
As we've just been hearing, if you have a domestic hit, you might be on your way to global success too, which is why it matters where you choose to film. That's why here at the Media Club, we use Podshop Studios to bring you our show every week with state-of-the-art commercial-grade recording equipment for both audio and video. Podshop's got everything you need to make your podcast stand out. So if you're just starting out or a podcast pro, like ourselves, Podshop guarantees professional recordings every time. You'll even benefit from a dedicated engineer on hand, ready to help with any technical details, so you can focus on the talking whilst they handle the rest. And right now, you can get 25% off your first booking by using the code MEDIACLUB at podshoponline.co.uk. That's the code MEDIACLUB at podshoponline.co.uk. Welcome back. Before we return to our guests, here's what we've been talking about in the Media Club this week. After an 8-month search, Disney has found their European chief, and it's ITV's Unscripted boss, Angela Jane, who's been running the teams behind Love Island and I'm a Celebrity. Spin back a little further in her CV, however, she commissioned a lot to E4, including In-Betweeners and Dead Set, which was sort of one of the forerunners to Black Mirror. Let's see what she gets up to with Mickey Mouse's money. Meanwhile, Kamal Ahmed has left his role as head of audio at The Telegraph after just over a year at the title. Ahmed also co-hosted The Daily Tea, which has made his exit perhaps a little more public than most media roles. Will he follow his friend and colleague Will Lewis over to The Washington Post? I guess we will find out. And The Guardian this week has announced a new encrypted messenger service that operates from within its existing app. Developed in partnership with Cambridge University, the tech is open source, allowing any news outlet to adopt this technology. Links to those stories and all of the things we talk about on the show you can get on our Substack. Just head to themediaclub.com. That's themediaclub.com. It's free to sign up. Michael and Jake are still with me. Michael, has the newsroom had their induction yet on the new encrypted app?
We're across the app, yeah. It's an exciting development for us because obviously, you know, in the job we do and the sort of traditions of The Guardian, we're quite frequently dealing with these stories that involve, you know, very confidential sources, vulnerable sources at times. So it's really great to have this new piece of kit. And it's also, I think, just reaffirming to see technology being used sort of in a positive way in journalism. It can be very disruptive. We know all about that, the challenges that come with AI and all the rest of it. But actually, this is some smart people working with The Guardian to do something really positive that's going to help our reporting.
Because normally a lot of that sort of send me an encrypted message, you know, I'm quite media savvy, but I look at it and go, God, that looks complicated. If I wanted to tell you something, like, do I just create a dodgy Yahoo email account and send it that way? Are contacts concerned about this stuff? Do they want to send it to you this way?
Well, it's important for us as a newsroom to get it right and to protect people. So it's really on us to have a system that's going to help people do that. And this is done through the app, and it's done in a way that someone sort of monitoring activity couldn't tell it from just normal activity on the app. So it's a really important bit of kit. I mean, and I remember The Guardian has done big stories over the years involving, you know, very confidential sources. But, you know, I remember in particular things like Ian Tomlinson's death those years ago at the G20 riots. We had sort of people contacting us. We had footage in the end that was pushed rather than, you know, this idea that it just sort of happened. So these stories are really important, and it does rely on people coming forward and know they'll be protected by us.
Jake, do you ever have any anonymous tip-offs for any of your stories at Message Heard?
We do. You know, Signal and Telegram, you know, these are the sort of channels which I guess we typically use for more sensitive things. I mean, even WhatsApp to a certain degree is encrypted, right? And thank goodness, because I'm still getting WhatsApp messages from Anjem Chowdhury every now and again, and I'm thinking, thank goodness this is encrypted, or I'm sure I'm on every watch list going. But no, I think it sounds great. I mean, the only thing I suppose is the discoverability and awareness for other people for them to feel that confidence that actually this is something that I can really trust. Because I always think that the best publicity for anyone in that sort of world was Telegram, when the French were saying to the Russian founder, you know, we want to put you in jail. But all that proof was they couldn't crack it and get in. And I just thought that was great publicity for the security and use of Telegram.
Well, if we combine newspapers and audio, it comes to one of your projects at the moment. So you recently announced a partnership with The Standard, the Evening Standard,
yes.
Where you're sort of taking on all their podcasts. What's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think to try and sound smart, we'd probably call it, you know, a strategic partnership. I think what that really means is that we've sort of taken over the podcasting output and operations for them, really. And it's one of those sort of cases, I think, where can we be slightly cleverer in sharing the risk and sharing the reward by bringing together our core competencies of, you know, they are one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing digital newspaper in this country, huge amount of credibility, great newsroom, great access to story and journalists, and it bring in with us, right, the ability to be able to do podcasting end to end on, you know, both at high quality editorial level, but also on a commercial level, and exploit those opportunities out there. And so it's early days. We're trying not to break anything in the beginning, but we've already had some real successes. You know, our first show with Wondery, we did as a licensing deal, Killer Privilege, which really did utilize their newsroom and our narrative storytelling chops. And we just found out, I think they told us it was their third best performing license deal globally, right? Which shows you a London-based newspaper and a UK-based podcasting company. We can mix it with the big boys in North America if you create something compelling.
So why does someone like The Standard want to work, like sort of outsource it versus do it themselves? Obviously, they're moving more to a digital thing. Why not make that a central part of the newsroom?
I think it probably comes down to a mitigation of risk. You know, how do you skip a few rungs of the ladder? Well, bring some people in that actually hopefully know what they're doing. We've been going, 7.5 years now, so we'd like to think we know what we're doing. And also cost, right? You talk about the Telegraph, right? People leaving. Well, I don't know about the performance of it, but I know that a hell of a lot of money was spent. And so how do you dip your toe in that water first? Look, we might do such a good job that we do ourselves out of a job. And that would make sense, right? With the way that podcasting is growing. So it feels like a sensible melding together of core competencies where ultimately, if you're willing to share in the risk, let's share in the reward.
Podcasting's been around quite a long time. A lot of newspapers have done a variety of different things in it. I think often it's sat in the bucket of, we need to get into this space, and kind of the business model doesn't really matter. It's just we've got to be out there with it. Is it partly that everyone's having a bit of a think now about what has worked, what hasn't worked, maybe not launching 20 shows a year to no listeners, and they've got to make these things more successful?
I think so. I think, podcasting for however long, the audio team was a subset of the video team and sat in the corner of the newsroom, right? It wasn't treated necessarily as a craft in its own right. And I think you could be the best journalist in the world. It doesn't make you the best podcast producer in the world or create the most compelling podcasting content. I mean, one example I always think of is, I can't remember his name now, but a guy who I know who was a producer at WNYC, where they have the New Yorker Radio Hour. And he would come with these Pulitzer Award-winning journalists turning up, with their laminated bits of paper, just thinking, I'm just going to read out my story. Actually, no, it needs to be reinterpreted, reimagined in a different way that lives natively in audio. It's going to sound rubbish if you just read it out. And I think there is now perhaps more of a sophisticated understanding that podcasting needs to be treated as its own distinct thing. It is a craft and needs to be treated as such.
Are there too many newspaper journalists as podcast presenters?
Yes. Don't even have to think about
that. Michael, why is it that, there's obviously a lot of podcasts from newspapers across the board. Journalists love being on them. They love presenting them. Is it ego? Is it getting to new audiences? Why has it been such a big thing, do you think?
Well, I think at the base of it, if you're a journalist, you want people to read your stuff, hear your stuff, and the format becomes less important. And I think what we've discovered is when you have a great story, you can then think about, well, what's the best way to tell this story? And that's been the great thing about the innovation that's happened around here, is that, you now have different avenues to go down. And I look at the stuff we do at The Guardian with Today in Focus, for example. You can really see, having seen the work they do, their expertise in doing it and putting it together and thinking, even on my own story, thinking about different ways to present it. It's really fascinating. You can see the amount of expertise that goes into that.
Does that team sort of come to you and go, we saw you've been doing this, or we'd like to get involved, or tell us about it? What's that process
a lot of
like?
Guardian journalists have appeared, and increasingly it's more interwoven and just part of what we do. I mean, at The Guardian, we've done podcasts for a long, long time now. But even since starting this job, for example, I've been on our Today in Focus podcast, sorry to mention it again, and to talk about the media industry. So it's just more and more just part of what we do, I think.
I've been working with another media company as well on podcast projects, Al Jazeera, obviously a TV outfit predominantly. How do you decide what's a video podcast, what's an audio podcast? Is it a TV show? What did you do with them, and how did you decide what it would be?
Well, this is where I think it becomes more open to debate, and you have to sort of ask that existential question, what is a podcast, right? And it is a video podcast. I would define it as that, but also in reality, it's a low-grade TV show. And I don't mean low-grade in quality, but I do mean low-grade in, if you were to compare the budget, sadly. Yeah. One of the things that we've learned from that, actually, which I think is an interesting stat, is how much of that audience is actually people watching YouTube on their televisions.
Yes.
And so treating it as a TV show, but watching it through the YouTube search, through the YouTube search function. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, with that show, True Crime Reports, and it's been amazing to make because it's sort of had, I think, about almost 10 million views on YouTube in the 6 months it's been going. We've won multiple awards. We won the gold for Best True Crime at the New York Radio Festival the other week, beating HBO's The Jinx, which I think is the most watched or most consumed true crime show. I'd love to know what our budget is compared to theirs. How would you do something as a narrative podcast that works in video? That was the question that we were trying to answer. And through us thinking about it, the answer we've come up with, and I'm glad to say audiences are sort of taking to it, is by using generative AI within a distinct visual language of the show, where you've got a host who is, looking down the barrel of a camera, telling you a story. It's got the same amount of...
Who is real.
The amount of times people ask me, is she AI? She is a real journalist. Hala Mohideen, she's a fantastic journalist. But then it's exemplifying what is being said with visual aids so that you can consume it that way if you want. But in the audio version, that is not just ripped. It is, sound design. It is created as if it was a native audio listening experience. And those two things live happily side by side because they don't cannibalize each other, because some people want to listen to it and some people want to watch it.
I mean, the AI side is fascinating. I think people aren't entirely sure what they should do with AI. Obviously, people can, in the creative industry, you can see the benefit of it.
Yeah.
I think some people are going down a route of almost like stamped, AI has not touched this, it's purely human. Others at the far end are like, hey, it's an entirely generated piece. I mean, it makes it even more complex when you add a news organization into that. How did they feel about adding in that sort of material?
I think we were very open and honest and transparent from the beginning, because one of the sort of misconceptions, I think, is that we're doing people out of work by utilizing AI. Actually, I think it democratizes the process by being able to create video content, and it's created more jobs than what would be for a traditional video podcast, because it takes a hell of a lot of wrangling. It requires animation, it requires editing, and actually the new language which you're going to have to learn, in the same way that people have been learning to code, is how do you train and prompt the AI, generative platforms that you're using in order to create something that's compelling. And let me tell you, that is something which is difficult. It is hard to wrangle. It is a skill, and it is a new language which needs to be learnt.
Also, there's about 20 different platforms to test out to try and work out which is the best.
Well, we've invested in creating our sort of own proprietary platform to try and knit it all together so that we can stay on top of it. I would be lying if I told you that I understood how that worked, but luckily I've got some very clever colleagues. And look, you can stamp your feet. It's not going anywhere. Yeah. It's about how do we utilize it in a way which is ethical as possible. And if you just outsource it to AI, it's going to be slop and it's going to be rubbish. But there is a way to use it in a curated and refined way, which is creating new jobs, I think.
When you saw some of the demos from Google's kind of VO3 product,
they're scary.
Did you think, great, this will help me do more of that or do that better?
It will be able to help that, but what the problem is with that is we're relying on people to be honest about, hey, AI has been used as the bedrock of the creation for this. And when it gets to that level of humanistic realism, it becomes difficult, because people can, create stuff and pass it off as it being real human beings when it's not. And to me, that's where my brain starts to break a little bit, and it does get a little bit scary. And so how do you self-report? How do you self-govern the use of this thing where it is honest and open and transparent? That's a different question, perhaps.
Well, we'll look to see what you'll add into hopeful for Series 2.
Yeah.
Okay, just enough time for the Audio Network Media Quiz. Let's see how much attention our guests have been paying to the media world this week. What's the quiz called this week? It's going to be The Wonders of Media. So in memory of the producer of those wonderful Professor Brian Cox Wonders of series, Michael Lockman, who's recently died, this week we're playing The Wonders of Media. I'll marvel at the wonders of 3 media stories of the week in a knowledgeable way. You just tell me what the heck I'm talking about. And this week, to celebrate Audio Network's new orchestral collection, Alex has selected 3 suitable works to score the quiz, recorded at the world-famous Abbey Road Studios. Okay, it's a best of 3, so buzz in with your name if you know the answer. So Jake, you will say...
Jake.
Michael, you will say,
Michael.
let's play The Wonders of Media. This phenomena was last seen 16 years ago. The graceful arc across the sky, a liquid seemingly suspended in mid-air. It's hard to believe that just a thin membrane that protects us all, and that it's provided by radio waves. What's the story?
Jake.
Yes.
It's something to do with the Rolling Stones?
No, good guess. This is Radio X.
Okay.
They have created beer-proof parkas ahead of the Oasis reunion tour. I mean, it's not the beer that I'd be worried about, and I am standing for the Oasis gigs. So yes, they've come up with some basically like cagoules that you can wear. So a classic bit of radio PR. Do you think we're going to see quite a lot of brands jumping on the Oasis bandwagon?
I think we might do. You sort of periodically get sort of waves of TikTok trends hailing back. And actually I did a piece quite recently about, it's awful, but nostalgia for the noughties. I mean, was the noughties that long ago? Apparently it was. But that's a big trend. So you could easily see Oasis hooking into that, couldn't you?
Yes.
Will any of them turn up at Downing Street this time, though?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. Okay, time for our second wonder. Now, it might look like a 1960s version of Star Wars, but just this 40-second video took the power of 130,000 stars. Isn't that just mad?
Really struggling.
Come on, gents. You haven't been paying that much attention.
No.
So, we mentioned the BFI earlier.
Yes.
Oh, Jake.
Yes.
It's the imagery that's been training.
AIs have been trained by over 130 hours of TV and film scripts.
Yeah, that's it.
Do we want the world's AI to be trained on our content? Maybe that's a good thing.
It's a good and a bad thing, right? You know, if you don't want to outsource the creativity to it, but in the same way, you know, if you look at the BFI in particular, the archives that they've got there, right? If we can synthesize that in a way so that it isn't lost to history, or that you have to physically sit in the BFI and manually scroll through it, then that's an amazing thing for us to be able to utilize. So, like anything, there's good and bad depending on its usage.
Hey, Michael, and this week Disney and Universal started legal proceedings against Midjourney, one of those AI creators. So they're the big one for images originally. Are the old media going to be able to bring the new boys to heel?
Well, it's interesting. It's a very live political question, and still in this country, obviously, we've got our own regulations on.
I mean, the government's
training.
quite pro using this material.
Yeah, well, certainly the idea was we have this sort of opt-out system. You've got to opt out if you don't want your stuff to be trained. There's obviously been quite a big backlash against that, and obviously the consultation's ongoing, so it's quite a live battle. And you can see, you know, within the government over here, there's a certain allure to the money of big tech. You would think, you know, we're desperate for growth. The government's desperate for growth as well for the public finances. So you can see those pressures, but you know, clearly there's a huge argument yet to be had, and we still don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. It's a crucial moment for regulation.
Yeah. Okay, wonder number 3. Imagine I'm walking through a barren desert or something whilst saying these lines. Okay, here we go. You might think that two stars colliding would be an event in itself, but you'd be wrong, because slowly, over hundreds of millions of milliseconds, a new star is born. So, this is a podcast that has been rebranded this week.
Oh, Jake.
Yes.
It's Jamie Lang and Sophie Haboo's rebranded show.
Yes.
I think it is now. Is it Nearly Parents?
Yes,
They've
it's now
rebranded
called Nearly Parents. It was called Nearly Weds.
Yeah,
and
Newlyweds, I think, afterwards, yeah.
Yes. So it's been around. It's been around quite a bit.
Yeah.
Do you think it's quite, obviously their lives are changing, baby on the way. Is this quite a clever, canny move of Jampot who make that to kind of keep the show evolving?
No, I think it's smart, because influencers who are increasingly supposed to document every facet and aspect of their life, you know, they think about, I think probably, you know, in eras, right? And it captures and encompasses the era of what they're discussing, right? They're about to get married, they've just got married, and now they're about to have a kid. I mean, I'm going to hazard a guess that maybe the next rebrand might be Newly Parents, you know, or something like that. But I think it's smart because it allows your audience to understand the parameters probably of the kind of things that they're going to be talking about. So it makes sense because it's an evolution of their lives, and their show is fitting in with that. I think it is smart.
I mean, because normally you'd say with brands, don't mess with the brand, kind of consistency, keep it all the same.
But the brand is them rather than the format of the show, right? And the show is just the conduit by which their fans can access information about their lives.
Do you think, Michael, we need another parenting podcast? Is there a gap for another one?
Well, if you can make it work, why not? But, I can't wait for, nearly career switch and nearly retired, which I'm sure is coming down the line.
Nearly retired would show that they really have had some success.
Made it work,
over the time. Probably holographic by that point. Okay, that makes Jake just about our winner there of the quiz.
I'm buzzing. Beat the Guardian media editor. What a fail.
I'm sort of disappointed that my amazing Brian Cox impression didn't really...
It was very good.
Yeah, okay. Didn't really carry over the line.
It's on us, Matt, don't worry.
So my thanks to Jake Warren and Michael Savage, and of course to Alex Audio Network for this week's suite of music inspired by their new orchestral collection. You can browse tracks by celebrated composers such as Lorne Balfe at audionetwork.com. That's audionetwork.com. So, gents, where can people keep up with you and your work? Michael?
Well, of course, at The Guardian. So please, anyone out there with media-related stories, get in touch. michael.savage@theguardian.com.
Or Encrypted through the app.
Absolutely. They're ready to go.
And Jake, how can people see what you've been up to and what's next?
Well, for all things Message Heard, obviously the website, which is www.messageheard.com, across all the typical socials. Or if people want to send me abuse, I think I'm on X at the Jake Warren. So there will be some professional boasting and letting you know what's coming soon as well.
Excellent. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us. Remember, you can sign up to our Substack. It's free and it's at themediaclub.com. My name's Matt Deegan. I'm your host. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. We'll see you next week.